bluff on his part, and that he's going to be trying to get something back for Tristan Jarry. But he might be stuck with him. That might be the other bad part. The one thing I will say, you said Jim Rutherford always put his cards on the table. Sometimes that was good. Sometimes that was bad. Oftentimes he still managed to make a deal that might help the Penguins. Think about the Jeff Carter trade. If you're thinking about whether Jarry will get moved this offseason, did anybody have the Jeff Carter trade even remotely on the radar? Even knowing that maybe, Hextall obviously had some familiarity there. No, that came out of the clear blue sky. So I'm hoping this is caginess, because I really don't know, even if you're confident in the guy and you think he played well in the season, how you could possibly feel good about coming back with him as one of your two goalies next year.
Well, I think Jarry's confidence is shot. I mean, it's hard to come back and bounce back from that kind of performance, one of the worst we've seen in recent history with the Penguins in the postseason. They have to at least bring another goalie in to challenge him for the #1 job. They have to, right?
I hope that they do, yes. But they might figure, hey, we have Casey DeSmith still, and Casey DeSmith will be around, and he'll just play the games that Tristan Jarry didn't, just like this year. And if it gets us back to the playoffs and Tristan Jarry falters in Game 1, well, then Casey DeSmith is going in for Game 2. That's going to end up being one of the great unknowns of this Penguins postseason. What would have happened if there was a healthy, rested Casey DeSmith and Mike Sullivan confidently went to him at the first sign of trouble? My gut tells me, Richie, that we'd still be talking about Penguins games that are happening in the second round. But that's just my gut.
I think you're right. I mean, I think they get by with just average goaltending. Really, I do. I think they were good enough to beat the Islanders with average goaltending. It's too bad Tristan Jarry was just way below average. The other thing he talked about, and I'm bringing this up because we had the NHL draft lottery today, and Buffalo has the #1 pick, Seattle has the 2nd pick, but they also have the expansion draft, and they get to select one player from every team except for Vegas. So they will select someone from the Penguins, and Ron Hextall said it'll be a good player. I mean, we can kind of have an idea who they're going to protect. You get to protect 7 forwards, 3 defensemen, and 1 goalie if you go that route, or just 8 overall skaters and a goalie. I think they'll do the 7, 3, and 1. But what guy do you think that they potentially might leave unprotected? And this is maybe a chance where you can deal a guy in the expansion trade that you might not want or that might not fit with your team.
Well, I think Ron Hextall said there's not going to be any side deals done or cut. He doesn't expect them to be. Again, could be caginess. I mean, as for a player that I think that they might lose that I would not like to see them lose, I could see maybe a Teddy Bluger type of guy, somebody that's versatile enough to play third-line center. I think having depth down the middle is something that most teams always covet in the NHL. So he's a guy that I would be pretty concerned with losing. I'll be interested to see how they divvy up the forwards. I mean, like you, I have a pretty good idea of who I think is going to get protected. But it's going to be interesting to see which guys don't. And then I think you're going to have a much easier kind of path to determining who might get plucked. But for me, Teddy Bluger being gone would stink because I've really enjoyed watching him develop here. And I think he's one of those guys that can sort of help bridge the gap to whatever the next era for the Penguins looks like, and also prolong this one for as long as it can by being a cheap, effective player for them.
A guy that came to mind for me would be a guy like Marcus Pettersson. A young defenseman. He potentially could be left unprotected. That would be a guy that I would be concerned with losing.
That.
You're okay? You'd be okay with losing
that.
Pettersson over Bluger?
Yeah, I mean, I think Bluger is probably the better player or has the higher ceiling. Like, what is Pettersson? I think what you've seen from Marcus Pettersson is probably what he's going to be. He's about 6'4", but he doesn't play like he's 6'4". He's more of a finesse player. He's good. When he's good, I would say like his ceiling is kind of low, his floor is kind of high. So those are players that are good depth players, but I don't love his contract for them. Like, what does Marcus Pettersson do that justifies the number that he's getting? What is he superb at? What does he excel at relative to other defensemen that makes him special? Would you argue that there's anything you could single out? Because I couldn't.
No, I couldn't either, but he was probably the 4th defenseman that I'm trying to think of who they would leave unprotected. I mean, a guy like Cody Ceci, but they're going to protect Brian Dumoulin, I would imagine, Letang, and Marino.
And Marino.
They would have
Cody
to be
Ceci's free agent. I mean, the big problem with Cody Ceci is going to be, can you pay him enough money, given what he did for you this year, to keep him? So, Yeah, I mean, the three guys that they're going to protect seem pretty obvious to me. If it's Marcus Pettersson who's gone, I mean, so be it. I can live with that. That
Plus,
stinks,
it frees up
I
some
guess.
money, like you
what
said.
What have they won with them?
The plus side of it, it'll free up some money for them to go out and get someone else somehow.
Yeah, if it's Pettersson or Bluger, and I have to pick one of those guys gets taken here, please take Marcus Pettersson, because I think Teddy Bluger's best is still ahead of him.
All right, we're taking your phone calls in just a little bit. 412-575-2600 is the number. Back in a couple minutes.